Okay, welcome back. We're on deck. You're on deck, and we're in prep test 82, section 3. And we'll try hands at questions 19 and 20. So in question number 19, the issue is to identify a flaw, right? The reasoning in the medical researcher's argument is most vulnerable. Okay, so again, I've got my issue. I'm about to read the rule, which is the argument using applications. The application is the only reason I'm reading the argument is to apply the issue to it and try to come up with the answer before I see an answer. So what do I have here? And I know there's a flaw in it. So at the, whatever it is, Flego Corporation, all employees who works involves heavy lifting. I'm sorry, all employees whose work involves lifting heavy objects wear black belts to prevent back injuries. Okay, I got that. However, a study found that Flegco employees who wear black belts are actually more likely to suffer back injuries than are employees who do not wear black belts. And I stop and say, well, yeah, well, that's because the folks wearing the black belts are maybe engaged in a, they're lifting heavy objects. I don't know what the rest of these folks do, but they're probably not lifting heavy objects. So, yeah. And the conclusion is this suggests that black belts do not help to prevent back injuries. That's kind of a dopey conclusion. And what I'm looking for here is there's the folks who don't wear the black belts aren't lifting heavy objects, something like that. Okay. A, it compares the incidence of back injuries between two groups who probably do not have the same risk factors for back injuries. And I'm there, I'm gone. That's the answer. A is the answer. And, you know, this is kind of, this is really kind of an interesting one. Because if you go past A, you're likely to see time get sucked away. But I mean, A's it. Let me go read B here and say, so you passed A because, well, you're taking the test as though it's not psychometric, right? You're taking it like, well, it's an academic test. I'll look at all the choices. That's nice. B, it fails to address the possibility that Flegco Corporation employees are more likely to wear, I'm saying black belts, it's back belts, are more likely to wear back belts than are employees who perform similar tasks in other corporations. That's got nothing to do. This is internal to Flegco. C, it takes for granted that if a factor is associated with an increased likelihood of a certain effect, that factor must causally contribute to that effect. Well, but you know, it sounds nice, but the the belt is not causing the injury; it's failing to prevent it. So this is not a question of causation. Nobody's saying that the back belt itself causes the injury; it's just not preventing it. So no. D, it confuses the claim that a phenomenon does not causally contribute to a certain effect with the claim that that phenomena causally contributes to preventing that effect. Well, it doesn't confuse it. It makes it quite clear. The argument makes it quite clear that when the folks who wear the back belt uh, are injured, they're suffering more back injuries than the folks who don't wear the back belt. So it's not confusing anything. It's simply saying, okay, wear the belt, and you're at greater risk of injury. So D, it is not confusing those two things. And again, the belt does not contribute to the injury. It simply fails to protect you from getting the injury. It doesn't cause the injury. It just doesn't prevent it. And E, it fails to address the possibility that Even if a factor is sufficient to produce a certain effect, its presence may not be necessary in order for that effect to be produced. Again, this is not producing anything. It's simply failing to prevent an injury. So, the thing about 19 is if you had picked A, reached a high likelihood that that was the answer, and had gotten your ass out of there, you'd be in a lot less pain. So the answer to 19 is A. 20. Issue is, which one of the following, if true, least strengthens the argument? So here with, the word least modifying the word strengthen, you're going to have to read all the choices. So let's see what we have here. Winter's Tale, it was 1610 to 1611, is modeled after Euripides' Alcestis, 5th century BC. Okay, so we have one book that's modeled after the other. Seems undeniable. Okay, got it. However, it is generally accepted Shakespeare knew little or no Greek. Okay, so Euripides' original play would be an unlikely source, right, because it was written in Greek. Thus, it seems most likely that Shakespeare came to know, the play through a Latin translation. Okay, so that's the argument here is Shakespeare used a translation of the play, and the translation that Shakespeare used was in Latin, from which you can infer that Shakespeare would need to be able to read Latin. Okay, and we want to see which one of the least strengthens this. So A says Latin phrases that were widely used in England during Shakespeare time appeared in a number of his plays. Okay, I suppose on the edges, but if you're saying Latin phrases widely in use at the time, that really doesn't, it's not making a strong case one way or the other as to whether or not Shakespeare read Latin. We all have, I can give you some Latin as I sit here. Recips locator or nisi prius. And those are phrases that are common in the legal community, but that doesn't mean I can read Latin, which you can't. So A is okay. I mean, I'm going to keep reading, but it's not really moving me a great deal. Meaning, let's see what the others do. B, the only English version of Alcestis available in Shakespeare time differed drastically from the original in ways the Winter Tale does not. So the thing about B is it excludes English. And in other words, it excludes the possibility that Shakespeare was able to read this thing because it was written in English. And then you just have to take the next step that, well, Shakespeare lived in England. Now, I don't think that should be there because theoretically that shouldn't matter. But taking the English one off the table makes it somewhat more likely it would be Latin. So I think B does help. Well, B helped more than A. C, Paul Buchanan's 1539 Latin translation was faithful to the original and widely available, and that definitely helps. So Shakespeare could have gotten it from that. D, Shakespeare's father's community standing made it probable that Shakespeare attended grammar school where Latin would have been a mandatory subject. That would have put Shakespeare in position to have learned Latin. And E, there is strong evidence to suggest that Shakespeare relied on Latin translation of Greek plays as sources for some of his other works. And again, that would strengthen this. So the answer to question number 20 is A for Augustus. And we'll stop there.